Hello, hello, hello. I'm here in my do-rag. Um, and I'm all cozy up because I've just been feeling it's cold right now because it's summertime outside, so they turned on the AC. But I don't like AC. I don't like fake air. It just doesn't make sense to me. Like I understand the purpose and how it's valuable in terms of protecting people and older people with the heat and things like that. So I get it. But I personally do not like AC. I just don't like fake air, and I don't like cold air. And it's cold right now. There's no heat, and I like the heat, so I'm all bundled up. And I'm also just feeling kind of like slow and like sluggy. I guess I'm really in the Sunday energy. But it's Father's Day and it's Juneteenth. I just finished recording another video. Um, that's kind of just reiterating the same message again and again, which I'm thinking back to something I wrote. But anyways, I was thinking this morning, I was talking to my notes because I keep having this reoccurring, it's like a daydream or just like a thought that is like played out. Like it's an experience or a moment that I play out again and again that's never happened, but keeps coming up. And it's around men. It's usually around black men and black boys. And I was just listening to this reading that I listened to a while ago and thinking about how I've been talking about divine masculine energy just these past few days around that healing. And it's Juneteenth, and I was thinking about ancestors and honoring them as I was learning in this reading or hearing in this reading. And part of the healing process and honoring ancestors is also making sure that I can share the information that I get that is a little more scary and is kind of like a warning and is working with the darker aspects of magic and the spiritual in order to help my people and heal my people. And so I'm going to share this message that I've been getting and this feeling that I have. And honestly, I just would like you to bear with me because the only backing that I have of this being true is the fact that it's come up in my head a lot. So I've been nervous to share this because it's kind of saying something that I think is a big deal to say, and I get a little worried about that. But I see 8 and 9 and 9. And I feel like spirit is, and my ancestors really, and especially it being Juneteenth and me thinking about the divine masculine and it's Father's Day, so there's a lot of energy around black men. I feel that this is something I need to talk about. And if I can just put it out there and maybe, I don't know, I'm not a black man, I'm not a man, so this is not something that I felt personally within me, but I feel that it is a thing. So I'm just going to share it, and I really hope that this comes across with love, and I hope that people understand that I'm doing this because I think that it's something that we can and need to address, and it can bring healing. But I do think it's a real problem. And I'm honestly just nervous to say it because it could easily be taken a way that I don't want it to be taken, but I see how it could go there. So I'm a little nervous, but I'm going to share it anyways. I'm just going to read out what I wrote. So, and I also want to make it clear that I'm very new to all of the terms and stuff around spirituality. I'm just following my gut and listening to spirit and being guided by my spiritual team and my ancestors. So when I say things, please take it with an understanding that I'm just a regular person and I'm not like, I haven't been learning about this stuff for 30 years and I know all the ins and the outs. It's just what I feel. It's what's been planted in my mind, and it's come up a few times now that I'm like, okay, I should say something. So, yeah. So, this is what I have written down. Many men hold succubus or succumbed within them. I meant to write succubus, but I think it turned into succumbed, but I just saw 444. This has to do with spiritual surrogacy. I have a theory that during the ages of puberty and beyond, many men end up becoming possessed and become a host for the demons for demons and succubuses because their energy is so vulnerable, and so many of their insecurities open up, and they begin to realize on an energetic level the difference in weight, uh, the difference in weight, and the weight that they carry versus what women carry. I'm also going to pause and say that as I was speaking this out, I was just speaking, and maybe I was channeling, so I couldn't, also be aware of all of the gender spectrum and things like that, even though I am, and I acknowledge and I believe that gender's not real. I'm trying to, I couldn't keep all of that in my mind while I was also thinking about what I was thinking about and getting out the message. So please understand that I don't believe in a gender binary. I don't believe in any of that. I hope you can understand what I mean. I'm really talking more so about energies. So, and some physical things, but I'm talking a lot about energy. So this is not to be any type of prejudice or anything like that. Can you tell I'm nervous? Okay, I'm just going to start over. So, I have a theory that during the ages of puberty to beyond and beyond that, many men end up becoming possessed and become a host for demons and succubuses because their energy is so vulnerable, and many of their insecurities open up and they begin to realize on an energetic level the difference in the weight that they carry versus what other women carry. And in an attempt to match that weight, they take on this idea of spiritual surrogacy, but in a way that is very unhealthy and toxic, by taking on energy that doesn't belong to them. Kind of like empathic work. I think a lot of men do, and boys do empathic work very, very, from very young ages, but in a way that's unhealthy. By taking on energy that doesn't belong to them, it's like they are experiencing and exploring, unfortunately, and I don't even think consciously, the dark side of being, or not the bad side of being an empath, or the dangerous part of being an empath, where you are just taking on energy to fill yourself up so that you can feel whole, and so that you can feel like you're contributing, so that you can feel like you're enough, so that you don't feel empty, so that you don't feel lightweight, because men tend to be lighter than women energetically. And that's just because we have different paths. We were just built differently. There's nothing wrong with being lighter, but because they are, and they say that, men right now, our structures of gender don't align with being energetically light as a man. It would make you feel insecure, or it makes them feel like they're not real men or real boys, trying to be this manly man. Because we also attribute men with this like heaviness and this strength and this density and this thickness, this built up dark energy, when really it's women that host a lot of dark energy and a lot of heavy energy, but in a healthy way. There's a spectrum for all forms of energy. So women hold dark energy within them, because dark energy is also the energy of creation and imagination and things like that, which a lot of divine feminine energy holds. And we all have all energies within us. Yeah. But anyways, so it's really women that host a lot of dark energy, but in a more healthy way. And men, when they host too much dark energy, or even the same amount of dark energy as women, it's too much for them. It's not healthy for them, because they just were not built to sustain that type of darkness, and not at that level. They're not supposed to experience that level of darkness and that amount of darkness. So they are often victims of becoming houses for the bodies of demons and succubuses, or whatever you would consider like in your culture that is, or in your idea of spirituality that is energetically draining, and that causes people to become depressed and causes people to become violent. This can also happen to uh, this can also happen because of trauma, and it's hard for men to explain what's happening to them or what happened, and why they change, because it tends to affect them so young, and in this new world, because of the way that the patriarchy is, um, it's starting to affect young boys when they're entering puberty. So, like 13, 12, they're becoming victims. And at that age, defending yourself and being able to understand that this is maybe something spiritual that's happening, and even talking about that and saying that is like, who's taking you seriously? And who has the vocabulary to even say that this is what's happening? Or who would even want to admit that that's what's happening? If it's not, especially if, being seen as someone who can become possessed, or being seen as someone who can host demons or succubuses, is like, it makes you like a second class citizen, or there's something wrong with you, when it's really just because the way that the energy works right now, like on a spiritual level, I think that there's a lot of insecurities when people who are more dominated by their masculine energy here on earth, so men and young boys, they see women and young girls spiritually, and I think that there are insecurities and there's comparisons because our society has set it up that way. There really shouldn't be a comparison game, but there is, and that's because there's hierarchies, and so because women hold more and young girls hold more, and there's more of a heavily more attachment to that world, there it's seen as better, and they're seen as less than. And we're not allowed to have these scales of existence without it also being tied to your value as a person or as a being, and your importance of being alive and what you mean, and if you have meaning at all. So I think that a lot of men struggle with having purpose, and a lot of young boys struggle with meaning. But I don't think it's even always conscious, which is even more difficult to work out then. So, this could, in a sense, also be considered sexual violence, but on a spiritual level. And it's sexual violence not coming from other people, but coming from spiritual entities. So this could be considered sexual violence, but on a spiritual level. And it may feed into the hypersexuality of boys and men, which is not natural to them, not always natural to them, but is something that they are being controlled by. And there's no way to explain what's happening to them because we don't have a society that is super spiritually inclined, and allows for those conversations to exist, unless it's like in a church. And if it is, it's very, very heavily shamed. And all things around sexual energy are shamed. So then the sexual energy that you do possess also becomes shamed in that process. So then you just lose everything, And if you don't want to lose everything and you want to hold on, then you don't say anything. It's really hard. And if, you're just expected to already be like a rowdy, hypersexual teenage boy, which it's kind of like, that's not like, obviously we all have sexual energy and we have desires and we want to explore and we want to learn. But I don't think there's any kids who are naturally that hypersexual and in a way that is violent like that. I think that's like there's spiritual attacks happening to young children because of the lack of boundaries and because of the lack of education and because of the way we are so disconnected from the spirit world and yet so involved in the spirit world. And I think that we're not acknowledging all the ways that kids are really out here being brutalized. I mean, they always say the most vulnerable population on earth are children. And we talk about that in aspects of like kidnappings and sexual violence and things like that. But what in the spiritual aspect, that's also true, because they are also very, very, they're so close to that world when you're smaller. And the older you get, you build up boundaries, but you're still pretty close when you're like 10, 11, 12, 13. You're still really close. and but you also by that point have already had so many blocks being put up. So you can't even really express what's happening to you, even though it's really happening to you. And it's a very physical experience. Um, so, sorry. Yeah. So this, in a sense, could be considered sexual violence, but on a spiritual level. And it may feed into the hypersexuality of boys and men, which is not natural, but is something that they are being controlled by. But there's no way to explain what's happening to them because we don't have a society that is super spiritually inclined or spiritual and and allows for those conversations to exist. And how are you supposed to know that that's happening to you as a little boy or as a teenager um, if you're not encouraged to follow your feelings or to listen to your gut, your intuition? If you're not told that you're an intuitive being, you know? I mean, yes, there's a lot of men who have dominated, grown men who have dominated the spiritual work circuit in terms of here on earth, like marketing and talking about things like that. But generally, it's divine feminine energy that's considered intuitive, and divine feminine energy is connected to women when we talk about gender and things like that. So it's always the women and the girls that are intuitive and that are smart and this, they know and they follow their gut and they are really wise and blah blah. And so men are just like made to seem like they're like rocks, like these fools who, and it's also because we disrespect the physical, because we're like, oh, the physical has no, it's like just, it's dumb and there's no, soul behind it. And so when you push that narrative again and again, that's what you're going to process about yourself. So, yeah. Sorry, I'm just losing my thing. So how are you supposed to know that that's happening to you as a little boy or as a teenager if you're not encouraged to follow your feelings? You'll just think that you're crazy or that you're like everybody else because every other boy is behaving the same way and the ones that aren't are bullied. So you won't share with anyone because you don't want to come across as crazy, even though you're dealing with something very real. And this is why mental health is super important to acknowledge in our communities. But I've been having like these random daydreams or these just like experiences where I imagine talking to or confronting a young boy or confronting like a teenager or a grown man. And usually the situation comes from they are being rowdy and loud in a way that is it's not like they're just being kids, like they're doing a lot, or they're sexually harassing me, or they're catcalling me, and instead I immediately notice that they are possessed, and I tell them in these daydreams that they're possessed by a demon or they're possessed by a succubus or there's something going on, and I say that your friends are and you need to get away from them. And I try to help them by getting rid of it. And the people who are affected tend to have this really heavy energy. And we're talking about scales of meaning, right? So there's good, heavy, there's neutral, and there's bad, right? Just acknowledging a scale, this is bad. So they have this really heavy energy. Yeah. And it's not heavy in a good way. There's good heavy energy. Women's energy tends to just be more dense, tends to be thicker, tends to be darker. That's just the way we are. With men, it should be lighter. It's more comfortable for men and it's safer for them and more joyful for them when it's lighter. But we've gotten to a point where it's almost seemingly natural for them to be heavy, for them to exist. Yeah, even though that's not their natural state of existing. I hope this is making sense. And with the boys and the men that I talk to, it's always black men. And I think that makes sense. And I think it was probably happening to all men, but I just noticed that whenever I have a dream about it, it's a daydream. Or like just a random thought, imagination. I feel like that's significant because yeah, I just think that that's significant, that they're always black men. And I'm always thinking about, like when I'm having this experience, they tend to be like losing their friends, or they tend to be catcallers, like they're exhibiting behavior of being sexually violent, or and a predator, or they are violent, or they're depressed, or they're just angry, or they're mean, and they don't care, and they don't have ambition, and they don't have good friends, and their friends are all the same way as them, and they're also, yeah, they're attracting people who are the same, and it's really just the demons attracting the other demons, you know. Um, so they don't have any good influences in their life. And I think that all of these could be signs of boys who have been possessed, or who have energy in them that does not belong. And this is where, at this point, this could be considered like the uh, negative side to spiritual surrogacy that we need to be aware of. And this is where boundaries are very important, because men do participate actively in spiritual surrogacy very naturally. Spiritual surrogacy is what men do all the time. That is their thing. We see surrogacy only talked about really in the context of women in the 3D, in the physical, because of, you're a surrogate, you're carrying somebody else's baby. But men do spiritual surrogacy. That's like their form of like pregnancy. Like that's what they do. Or people who have that I'm sorry. Please just remember that I don't believe in the gender and all that. This is just the easiest way for me to talk about this. Please. Um. Anyways, yeah. So this is where boundaries are very important, and men don't really have boundaries, because men do spiritual surrogacy very naturally, because they want to partake in the creation process, and they want to be a part of creating life. They want to be able to experience the energy that women experience in terms of labor and pregnancy. In so many ways, they take on spiritual surrogacy. And it's a beautiful thing, actually, that they do. But when it comes to your insecurities and your unhealed shadow, they'll take on spiritual surrogacy in a way that is really not good. And it's also why men are always in the labor fields, and they're constantly in trades and things like that, and that things are really hard on you physically, and especially with black men. And it's why men were the ones going into the coal mines and things like that, and going into wars, being soldiers. Spiritual surrogacy is a huge part of men's existence while incarnating on earth, and it's something that we need to get real about, so that we can teach them how to have boundaries, and acknowledge what's their own energy, and what's the energy of something that doesn't belong to them, or something that doesn't feel good. We have to teach the men to have boundaries, and teach them to have standards for themselves, and not just adhere to the standards of others and other people's mindsets who are also hurt and who are also being possessed. We need to figure out what these demons look like and what they're attracted to, what the succubus looks like and how it presents in young boys and men. I feel like they look for people who just don't have confidence, and people who don't have boundaries and don't have a healthy relationship with their own energy, or don't even really know themselves, and haven't ever been given the opportunity to be creative and express themselves beyond the confines of what is a boy and what is a man, these super strict gender binaries. I feel like the people who live within those realms are most vulnerable to being attacked, because then your experience of your gender, and if you even adhere to gender at all, or your representation and your experience of your energy is not authentic. So you don't really know what your energy is even like. We say that this is divine feminine energy and this is divine masculine energy, but like, says who? It's really up to you. It's really up to you to decide what this energy is and what it isn't. No one else can tell you anything. We all hold all of these energies within us. We all define ourselves different ways, and every way that we define ourselves is a valid definition, because we are an expression of that thing. If it exists, then it is real, and it is a valid expression. So there's no right or wrong way to be in any of these energies, but there's just such strict bounds on what they are, even with divine masculine and divine feminine. Like, why is it a binary? And why is it these terms? And why is it so heavily connected to gender? And like, it makes it so hard to have these conversations because I want to talk about this and also make sure that I am making it clear that I don't care about gender and that I don't believe in binaries. But because of the way that things have been set up, it's just so limiting and so constricting that this ends up happening. You know, it's really unfortunate, and we need to find a way to expand our language while also making sure that we keep what, people want. Like, I think that it's fine for gender to exist if you want to identify with your gender. Like, I like being a woman. I like identifying that way. When I was a young girl, I liked identifying as a girl. And if you don't like that, then you shouldn't have to. You know, it's like a personal thing. It just shouldn't be as big of a deal as it is. But right now, it's like tied to your humanity, which is just insane. It just doesn't make any sense. Okay, so anyways, let me get back. Yeah. I feel like they look for people who just don't have confidence, people who don't have boundaries, people who are lonely, people who are desiring to belong and desiring to contribute in some way to build up a sense of purpose for themselves. It's also difficult for men because the way that women are given a natural purpose through their ability to create life, whether you want to or not, or whether you actually can or not with fertility and things like that, men don't have that same privilege. And I'm just calling it a privilege because coming in with like no purpose is a very hard existence on earth, or with no perceived or accepted or like naturally stated outwardly purpose is very hard on earth. At least with women and girls, you can say, oh, well, I can create life, you know? And like, that is a huge thing. That's like one of the big things that women always connect themselves to. Even if you can't, it like that energy is huge. It is. It's undeniable. It rules over a lot of the discussions, especially when there are arguments and like back and forths. That's, that's like one of the big shootout things. And I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that, imagine not being able to do that. I wouldn't want to not be a woman. I love being a woman. And I'm just saying that it's probably difficult to not have such an obviously accepted and clear purpose that everyone acknowledges all the time, whether you want that to be your purpose or not. I feel so like I'm uncomfortable because I'm not sure if I'm explaining any of this in a way that makes sense. And I'm like, don't attack me. Yeah, but with guys, like their portion in the creation process is not seen as anything special. It's not seen as anything significant. And they don't really have anything else that sets them, apart as like very important to life. They come in with like no purpose. And in some ways it's beautiful because it gives them a lot of freedom to just be. But in many other ways, in terms of a spiritual life, that can be hard and it can leave you feeling ungrounded and unrooted. And you're pulling on anything that can give you community, which is probably why gangs exist. And that's probably why people and men tend to want to get into sexual interactions or like act as if they want to get into sexual interaction so quickly. That's probably why they just have kids all over the place. That's probably why they become a part of a job or a workforce where there's a strong communal connection. That's probably why they enlist in wars. And that's probably, all of that contributes just to this need to have community and this need to belong and this need to contribute. And that is even because of these really damaging standards that we set around masculinity and femininity. And obviously there are just natural things of wanting to be a caretaker, but we define their ability to be a caretaker in a way that is so restrictive and so hyper masculine, and it's not even really masculinity. It's something else entirely. Oh my God, here I just said that. It's not even masculine energy. It's honestly something else. I don't even know what it is. It's probably the energy of these demons, and they're trying to make it seem as though it's human energy or it's loving spiritual energy, but it's fucking not. It's not. It shouldn't even have the title of masculinity because that's what makes masculinity confusing. It's not even masculinity. It's something else. It's something else completely. Just like toxic femininity is not femininity. It's something else. I don't know what it is. It's not that. Like, and yes, everything has a scale, so we could talk about the scale again. But I really don't feel like some of these things are even in this category. I think it's something else. I think that's why we need to expand our language and we need to begin to call things, bring it outside of what we already have and begin to think beyond the box and see beyond the veil and name things, give them different names. Like, we're going to have to start inventing new words, People are like, why are you, that's a fake word. All words are fake. We need to start inventing more words because some of this stuff cannot be attached to our already established things. It's too much. It's too confusing. And language is huge for us as human beings, so we need to be really intentional about that. But yeah, that's why so many spiritual women date or have a pattern of dating toxic men. It's why toxic sex is considered the best, even though it's also the worst thing for you, like, ever. Men can release some of that energy during sex, but not enough and not in a healthy way, so it always regrows. You have to take it out at the root. When they release through sex or in an intimate relationship with someone else, it's like letting a petal fall off of a poisoned flower, but it doesn't really solve anything. They have so much energy which can sometimes make them attractive to others who don't feel good or don't feel whole enough or don't feel good enough or have a wound that is connected to masculine energy, so they use those unhealed men to fill it. But all that energy seeps in and poisons everyone. They're like New York, fantastic and fascinating for all of its magical energy, and also draining, sick, and toxic for all of its energy. New York is a highly spiritual place. If you go there, you'll feel it, You'll feel the good and you'll feel the bad, and you'll see it. And with men and young boys who are not in a healthy state, I mean, there's a reason why people date toxic men. There's something attractive about it, but not in a good way. It's like seeing the spiritual right physically in front of you, because you are witnessing someone who is literally hosting a demon. That's what it is. Honestly, I mean, I don't know for fact, but like, what do we know for facts, I think that's what it is. I think that we are literally witnessing people hosting demons. So we're seeing the spiritual right there, and you're engaging with it so intimately. And the people who are addicted to that, they have their own problems to solve. And I'm going to get into that with women who have responsibilities. But yeah, and so in that way, it kind of makes me think of New York. Obviously, New York is not like this horrible place that needs to blah, blah, blah. But I'm just saying, you can understand the complexity of it and why it's hard to want to heal that energy, because you can see the alluring parts in yourself. I'm sure that toxic men don't look at themselves and they're like completely disgusted. I'm sure that they see a lot of great things. And I'm sure with young boys, you find community in other boys who are like that. You find strength and power. You find this sense of belonging and this purpose. There's a lot, but it's not coming, the root of it is not healthy, so eventually it falls apart. And that's not good, because you don't want children dealing with that and then growing up into adults that are affecting other adults and have children and affect those children, and it's just too much. It's way too much. So yeah, if you're a straight woman, or if you're a woman who likes to date men, or if you're a man who likes to date men, if you're a person who likes to date people who are unhealed, and you are aware of how much they need to heal, and you know that you can't do anything to help them heal, you have a responsibility not to date them. And I think that that's something that we need to be more honest about as well. You have a responsibility not to date them. If you are aware of how hurt somebody is, and you are aware that there is nothing you can do to help them, but you continue to get into a relationship with them and have sex with them, I consider that exploitation. And I think that you have a responsibility to make a better choice, not just for yourself, but for them as well. Like, you are aware that that person, literally, if you're at that level of hurting, you're not all the way present. You're not really running your body. I really think that some of these guys and young boys are literally they're hosts to demons. Like, they are being possessed. So there's a level of consciousness that's not there. So there's a level of consent that's not there. And, you're not present in your physical life, not enough to really make decisions that are the best for you. And in those situations, if you are someone who is looking to be in an intimate relationship with them and you can see what's going on, and I just don't believe, like, I know there's a lot of people who date toxic people and know that they're toxic and know that they need a lot of healing and know that there is nothing they can do. They know that there's nothing they can do to help them and continue to date them and continue to have sexual relationships with them. I think that that is wrong. I think that that's wrong because, like, what are you doing right now? It feels like you're taking advantage of someone who's, like, still a kid because, like, they haven't gotten a chance to grow up and evolve. They've been hosted by a demon. Like, I'm sorry, but that's just what I feel. And I think that people have a responsibility to be accountable for the relationships that they choose, or the situations they choose to participate in, when you know the power difference. And the power difference in those dynamics come from the level of awareness. You can't help that person, so why are you dating them? And it's also just like, where is the self-love? Why are you dating them? Because you're going to be hurt in the end anyways. But in terms of awareness, you know what's happening here. You know that they're not there. They're not all the way there. So what are you doing right now? That question just has to be asked because it doesn't make sense to me. It really doesn't. It really does not. And I understand if it's like one of those things where you're like, oh, I thought I could heal them. I thought I could help them. But when you know you can't, and like, let's stop being aloof. We know when we can't help someone. This is like why I've been talking about this judgment energy is coming in. Because there's just a lot of pretending happening. People just pretending. And it's like, even though it's obvious that you're lying, because nobody can call it out because there's no proof yet, or like there's no real evidence, it's like people just get away with it. But it's like, you can no longer pretend that you are not aware. Energy is going to become so physical and so obvious that you cannot gaslight your way. You cannot pretend and fake your way out of acting like you're not aware of certain things. We are all going to see that you are aware. It's going to show up in your very, very real life. And you won't be able to lie, and you won't be able to get away with it. And it's going to bring a lot of reality into a lot of people's lives. People stay playing with the spiritual, and stay having all of these statements and all of these things and all this shit to say, even though they know where they've done wrong. And it's just like, that's why I said that sexual violence is one of the most, it's something that almost everybody experiences, and almost everyone is a victim. And a lot of people who are victims are also perpetrators, are also abusers. And that's why the conversation around healing and rehabilitation and all of that is important, because we can't just throw people out, because people who are abusers also tend to be survivors. So the conversation just continues to get complex, and that doesn't mean that if you are the survivor, you don't have to take care of your abuser, It just means creating a society that doesn't throw people out so quickly that we don't even get a chance to begin to have a conversation about the root of what's happening, right? But we all need to acknowledge and be real about what we've done, That's why Judgment Day is Like, I'm saying judgment day, but it's not like it's the end of the world, you know, it's just judgment's coming. We're just getting a big dumping of karma. And as that happens, a lot of things are just going to become real. And it might become real on a public center stage, or it might just become real for you in your own life, and you and your friends, and you know, people in your circle will see it. It doesn't mean you're about to be embarrassed on the front lines, but either way, you're going to be held accountable. Every single one of us. And we've all done things. And I was saying in this previous video, that doesn't mean that you don't deserve grace. That doesn't mean that you don't deserve to heal. It just means that you've got to be real with yourself. You've got to acknowledge what you've done. I've got to acknowledge what I've done. We've got to take responsibility. We've got to apologize. We've got to heal. We've got to work through it. We've got to move forward. We've got to grow. No choice but to grow. And if you choose not to grow, you're going to be stuck in some weird, like warped, distorted timeline that doesn't exist. It's existing in the past. It's death energy. And you're going to be like grieving yourself even as you're alive. Your idea of reality is literally going to become so fucked because you're going to be playing with illusions and delusion and reality in a way that just doesn't make sense. It doesn't comprehend. And this is where the logical part of you really needs to choose to heal and choose to acknowledge what the truths that are coming out about the spiritual and how spiritual we are. It's like the merging of the logic with the spiritual, with the illogical, and seeing that things are more complex than you would ever, you know, previously have imagined. Sorry. Anyways, so yeah, the Three of Swords just came out. Heartbreak, sorrow, and grief. Honestly, this feels like, and I think a lot of people might be dealing with possession. I think a lot of people might be dealing with possession, if I'm being honest. Because I've only been talking about young boys and teenage boys and men because those were the like daydreams I was having. They're not daydreams. You know when you're just thinking about something, so maybe it is a daydream. Either way, those are like the thoughts that would cross my mind. But we all deal with this in some way. We all actively practice spiritual surrogacy in some way. And yeah, I think that spirit is coming in to clear that energy out though. Like I think that the demons are getting taken out, and that means that the toxins are being released. So a lot of people are going through their own little climate change disasters in their own bodies. A lot of people are going through their own apocalypses. The physical is going to become very real. The spiritual is going to show up in your physical body. You know what I mean? Because it's already there. But it's going to start showing up in the way that it's coming out. And it's going to be a lot. And you're going to need to change the way you eat. You're going to need to change what you wear. You're going to need to change the way that you, how physical you are. You're going to need to change who you're around. You're going to need to change where you live. Like, there's just going to be different changes in the physical because of the toxins that are being released. And in the end, it's really, really good. It's really, really good for us all, but it's going to be a journey. So be kind to yourself and be patient with yourself because it's going to be a journey. Yeah, a lot of rest and a lot of recovery. But ultimately, it's for the best. So, yes, new beginnings, prosperous new beginnings. I just wanted to share this. I'm glad I got it out, and I hope that it made sense what I was talking about. I feel like it made sense. So yeah, let me know what you think. If you feel like this is a thing, if you don't, let me know. Obviously, I would hope that this isn't. Like, I wouldn't wish this on anyone. But if it is a thing, we can deal with it, and we can address it, and we can begin to heal these types of things. Yeah. And I didn't mean to say, when I mentioned this is why it's important to acknowledge the reality of mental illness. I wasn't saying that in a way of saying that people who have mental health struggles are like possessed by demons. That's not at all what I meant. I just meant that it's just the same way that we are growing into a society that acknowledges the reality of the mental and the emotional. We also have to acknowledge the reality of the physical. That's basically all I was saying. So, yes, I'm going to go now. Goodbye.